In this regard, imagine that you had a startup or you were operating an accelerator 24 months ago, 2 years ago. If you were not studying the trends, if you were not paying attention to what was going on in your sector, if you were not aware of the fact that Microsoft was developing something called ChatGPT or OpenAI, you would
Mhm.
have neglected the fact that 6 months later, or roughly a year ago, AI would begin to change everything, just as the internet itself did 20,
Yes.
25 years ago. That change is innovation. But the mistake that's made is that most startups, most founders, and most professionals running programs think that or expect that they will adopt innovation as it changes their sector, as it comes to bear, as it becomes available to what they're doing. An accelerator will wait for AI to be meaningful or for there to be a solution for accelerators. And the
Yep.
mistake in that, or the problem in that, is the fact that everyone in innovation needs to be aware of the implications, needs to be aware that this is happening. And so if you're not at the leading edge, if you're not familiar with it and adopting it as much as possible and using it as much as possible, you're leaving the entrepreneurs in your program to fall behind because then they're not able to depend on you and look to you to adopt that technology as well. I touched on it very briefly, and then I'll let you share a different thought. I touched on it very briefly in the sense that you can also think of the impact of AI as the impact that we had 25 years ago with the internet. If you were an entrepreneur building a retail store 30 years ago and you wanted to sell things through message boards and bulletin boards and the version of the internet that we had back then, and you weren't paying attention to this thing called Amazon, or you weren't paying
Mhm.
attention to this thing called WordPress or Shopify or some sort of store or e-commerce infrastructure,
Yep.
obviously your venture would fail. And it would fail because of what the market is doing and the changes in the market that present an opportunity if you take advantage of it, but cause your failure if you're not aware of it and paying attention and using it.
Yes. And I love what you are bringing to the light because it's recalling me one of my preferred book, that is The Anticipatory Organization from Daniel Burrus. And I love that book because it contains something that for me is a mantra since I was a kid. I grew up in a basement where my dad was full of radio equipment because he was in the civil protection. And so he was always listening to the radio. And the radio were everything for him. Antennas everywhere, cables were wiring all around the basement and outside in the roof. The people were looking at us like, guys, you are a thunderstorm master with all these iron poles on the roof. And indeed, my dad was really a guy that was all in technology. I started with a very old Commodore 64 when I was roughly 6 years old. And then I saw the technology evolving until today that you can speak with whatever device and they start to talk back with you. So this disruption is something that is, I want to say, it for us because we grew up in an environment where we were kids, that we still were playing outside on the street. And so for our generation, and I'm 50 plus, as you see from my beautiful white beard, we got the shock from analog to digital. And the stuff that you were discussing before, to me, are very connected with one concept that is the behavioral engineering. That is the concept of the outcome of your action are defining your future. And so a lot of these incubators, what they miss is the connection between the trends and the outcome that they will produce. And I see this failure, if we want to change a bit topic to something that is maybe more familiar to leaders out there, with digital transformation, especially with the failure of the 20 years that we had since the Agile Manifesto with the Agile transformation, that a lot of organizations embrace this Agile Manifesto blindly, putting on the wall certificates that they got the Scrum Master and the Product Owner and they were Agile leaders. But did they change their behavior to obtain a different outcome? Or did they simply put a canvas on top of their plasters?